why we openly and obnoxious beauty. And then, I don't know if I didn't write it down, but cello music comes in.
Yeah, cello music comes in from a block away and I lose it completely.
Yes, yes. So you do have a rare gift for finding and expressing the beautiful in unexpected places, where a lot of your poetry, will be really dark and grim or even disgusting, but the way, the words you use to describe it, there's a certain kind of odd beauty about it.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And so the question is, how does your reverence for the beautiful fuel your poetry? Especially considering
Wow,
grim it would be.
that's a big question, and it took a turn from like the thing that you were saying.
What do you mean it took a turn?
Well, I mean, it was just like, I thought you were going one way with the question, and then the actual question
Which
itself.
way did you think I was going to go?
Well, I thought you were saying like, I thought you were going with like, you have an odd way of saying nice things. But you were going with like, how does a kind of attention.
Well, how does this, I mean, you're able to find beauty in the,
Yeah, no, I'm not disparaging the question.
Oh,
I think
no,
it's like,
I know you're not.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get like into discussions when people think I'm being combative, but I'm not. But yeah, continue, go with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that our fundamental project, I'm saying our because I'm assuming that a large portion of the people at this poetry reading are also writers or people who are interested in making. I think that a lot of our project as creative people is to defamiliarize experience, right? Is to say, the thing that you encounter every day that is common to all of our experience is actually quite extraordinary, even though we don't think about it as such, right? This is sort of one of the load-bearing projects of art. The Russian defamiliarist Viktor Shklovsky said his credo was "make the stone stony," right? Which is to say, like, we see tens of thousands of stones every day, right? Probably more. I don't know how many stones we see every day, but probably a lot, right? And like, how many stones? Every person in this room has definitely seen stones today, right? But how many of them can you like accurately describe in this moment, right? This is to say, like, what art returns to us is like the quality of that stoniness, like it allows us to zoom in on a stone and like really see that stone, or like, every tree outside that you see right now, all of those trees got to where they are because for years they've taken light from a star that lives 93 million miles away, turned it into glucose, like matter, like light from a star. 93 million miles. I'm getting emotional, but like 93 million miles away is this star that those trees took the light from and turned into matter, right? And then all of the matter that is those trees came from that starlight. Like, that is fucking nuts. Like, I don't know, I don't care if you can like tell me the like chemical formula for that or whatever. Like, you're naming magic. Like, it's magic. You know what I mean? And this is what I'm saying, right? Like, this is what art can do, right? Is it can make us like see a tree, and it can make us feel that magic, and it can defamiliarize, botany, or it can defamiliarize, geology, or it can defamiliarize love or grief or desire. You know what I mean? Like, this is what art can do. And so I'm interested in, that is always sort of what I'm trying to do, and I think that one way to get at that is to use language that people have never associated with a thing before. I think that helps us to recover some attribute of that thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a really good answer. That's awesome.
I think photosynthesis is nuts.
I really think about science the way you just described it.
Yeah.
It's more fun than what they teach us.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have so many of the hows, right? But we still have like none of the whys. You know what I mean? And I think that that's sort of what poetry takes up. It's like the why.
Yeah, it's wondering why. It's asking why.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I guess I'll hand it over back to you. Sure, we've got some questions out there.
Yeah.
So.
Do you guys have questions or concerns? Yeah. What's your name?
Oh, my name's Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. It's nice to meet you.
You were saying that some of your poetry kind of lives back here in your head, and maybe kind of this unconscious place. Sometimes I feel like we use substances to access that, and I'm wondering now how your creative process is, and
Yeah.
what states you kind
Yeah, that's super real. You know, there is this sort of like idea that, you know, writers drink to be able to like loosen themselves up in order to get into the whatever. But when I drank, I just drank about writing. You know what I mean? I never like drank to write. I just like drank and told people I was a writer. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It didn't work. That didn't work for me. But what does work for me, you know, I think that no matter how sort of feet on the earth skeptical you are as a person or as a creator, it's difficult to speak about the process of composition without minding the language of the supernatural, right? Like we say, hours flew by, right? Or we say, like, such and such a phrase just came to me, right? Even the most skeptical among us, and I'm not the most skeptical anything. So, you know, this to say, there are ways that I can prepare myself to be open to the gift of a poem. But I think that one of the hallmarks of a real poem for me, the hallmark of having written something true, is that after I've written it and I'm looking at it, I don't feel any pride in it. You know, it's not like, look, I whittled this beautiful bird that looks just like a finch, right? It's not like that. It's like I was here when this happened, you know, but I can't take any claim to it, you know. There is stuff happening here and stuff happening here that sort of gets filtered through the prism of my experience and my syntax. But in my favorite of the things that I've made, I don't have any sense of like, I am the author of this thing and I have gifted it to you, the world. You know what I mean? I don't know if that answers your question at all. Yeah. Hi, what's your name?
Elisa.
Elisa, it's nice to meet
Yes,
you.
nice to meet you. So this is actually, I think, a good follow-up on that question, because I think in addition to writing from your life and writing from the back of your head, you're obviously a voracious reader and a fantastic curator of poems on the internet.
That's very sweet. I appreciate
where I appreciate you often.
Thank you.
And so I wondered, you know, poetry, I don't know, is that world taught to us very often, especially in the, if you go to the college classes. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you came to be a reader of poetry and how you go on finding people to read.
Yeah. How did I become a reader of poetry? And how do I go on finding people to read? The people that I read tell me who else to read, you know. Not like, well, sometimes literally, but I mean like, but you know, I mean, they reference people in their work, they acknowledge people in the book, you know what I mean? Like this is, you know, everyone is having a conversation with everyone, you know, where this book is part of a conversation that has preceded me by millennia and will continue long after the last person has forgotten my name, you know what I mean? Just as every book in the store is, you know what I mean? And it's a really beautiful thing, right? So like, we're all talking to each other. We're all sort of just like chirping into this giant conversation, right? So that to say, like, everyone's leading me to, you know, there's no way to read a book and not have that book tell you about another book. You know what I mean? There's never been a book written that doesn't do that lives in a vacuum, you know? In terms of like how I started reading poetry, I think like many people, I had a seminal high school English teacher, you know. Yeah, shout out high school English teacher. Yeah. But yeah, there was one day where he sent me home with a stack of poetry books. He knew that I liked to read, and he sent me home with a stack of poetry books. And I remember opening up the first one, and it was like the clouds parted and like, you know, Gabriel came through with his trumpet and was just like, "Brr, brr, 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 you're a poet," you know what I mean? Like, it was just like this total shock of clarity. It was like, oh, this is the thing that I am. It was as if like I was like looking at my hair for the first time and being like, oh, I have dark hair. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, this is what I am. You know, it was like it was almost like kind of like annoyed, you know, because it was like, well, why didn't everyone tell me that this is like, you know, wasting my time teaching me like geography, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, that was that one. I mean, you know, there are other things that sort of led up to that, but that was I think the real sort of seminal moment for me. Yeah, hi. What's your name?
Hazem.
Hazem.
Yes.
Beautiful name. Thank you.
I'm really curious about your experience writing about being from a Muslim background, writing about addiction.
Yeah.
I'm asking this sort of thinking about my own experience. I come from a family that has addiction on both sides, and I've noticed sort of when talking with some of my American friends, like obviously talking candidly about addiction is difficult in any cultural context, but sort of the being Muslim, especially in relation to alcohol, like really puts a different sort of a different weight to it, and I've noticed that's like really it's put just like a lot of burden on my family in the ways we talk about it, and the ways we try and deal with it. And I was wondering sort of how you've navigated that. How's that affected or come up in your work?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. I think that in part of the work of rigorous compassion that I think is incumbent upon any public artist is the work of knowing whose story is yours to tell. And I think that the story of how those conversations happened with my family aren't entirely mine to tell, you know? But what I will say is that in the space of the work, you know, I come into every poem that I write completely unburdened by the thought of audience and unburdened by the thought of a public, which is to say the act of composition for me is completely divorced from the act of publication. I can write whatever the fuck I want in a poem, you know what I mean? And I have no anxiety at all about not publishing everything that I write, you know? I write way more than what I publish. And that has always been the case, that will always be the case, I hope. And I lose no sleep over the thought that I've written some poems that are just for me, or some poems that are just for my partner, or you know what I mean? And so I guess, so in the space, so I've written a lot of poems that deal with some of the things that you're talking about, but some of them I don't think have, I think some of those aren't mine to publish. I'll also say, Horace, the Roman poet, talks about the purpose of a poem being to delight and instruct. Those are his two things. You know, Frost kind of plagiarized it later and said poems should begin in delight and end in wisdom. But it comes from Horace, who said a poem should delight and instruct. And I think that these are really, really useful ways for me to think about what a poem that I publish ought to do. You know, it ought to, you know, I can write a poem that is only instructive. You know, that's like a diary entry, right? A diary entry is deeply instructive to me, but there's no delight in it for anyone else, right? It's just, it's telling me what I need to be told, it's working through what I need to work through. A poem that delights but doesn't instruct would be like, you know, a sonic exercise. You know, I wrote these like Fibonacci sequence poems for a while that were like, just, you know, making sounds based on, it was dumb, but it was fun for me, you know, it was like fun because I was like playing this game, but I would never publish them, you know what I mean? They were delightful for me, but there's no instruction, you know what I mean? So when a poem does both of these things, and the delight that it brings will be will come not at the expense of anyone else. And this doesn't just go for like the situation that you're talking about, but goes, you know, much more zoomed out. You know, when you look at someone like Kenneth Goldsmith or Vanessa Place, here are instances where people didn't think that through. You know what I mean? Here are instances, you know, those sorts of controversies happen when somebody doesn't really calibrate that idea of like whether this delight is coming at someone else's expense. You know, that's what I'll say to that, and we can talk more afterwards.
We have time for one more question, so we do have time for Kaveh to sign books.
I think there's a hand over. Oh, and maybe, okay, there's a hand, I saw him, but then maybe we can talk afterwards.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Okay. One of the things that I found really interesting when I was reading Portrait of the Alcoholic for the first time was that you used some forms in there that felt very different than anything else I've read.
Your name is Eli, and we
Yeah.
talked before this, and you wanted to hear River of Milk, and I forgot.
It's okay. But
No.
it's speaking
I'll read it. Are you hanging out afterwards?
I can.
Okay, I'll read it to you afterwards.
All right. So,
I'm sorry, I apologize.
no worries. Speaking.
Yeah, sorry, I'm listening to your question too.
Okay. And I'm so happy you read Separate Umbilicus too.
Oh, thank you.
Because this relates to that. And it's
Yeah.
like those moments where you have this associative field and you literally have those gaps
Yeah.
in there. I was wondering if you could speak to the process of writing a poem like that and what those gaps are supposed to mean, as well
Yeah.
as the poems where like you have quatrains that are on alternating sides.
Yeah. So there are poems in the book that have these gaps in the middle of the line. They're called medial caesuras, but they have gaps in the middle of the line, right? One of the things that was really, really exciting and thrilling to me when I was writing this book was discovering the unpunctuated line. I thought that was really, really I thought it was the wildest thing in the world. It let me get to, you know, I was reading like Ellen Bryant Boyd's Headwaters and Middle and Late Merwin, and I was totally fascinated by the way the unpunctuated line gave them such precise control over momentum and inertia and centripetal force, and how an unpunctuated line gives a line a real sense of urgency, right? The downside of the unpunctuated line, of course, is that it comes at the cost of semantic clarity, right? Punctuation gives us semantic clarity. And so, for instance, if I said, Eli ran to the store, quickly he bought a grapefruit, right? If that line is all unpunctuated, the word quickly can modify the speed at which Eli ran to the store, or it could modify the speed at which he bought a grapefruit, right? That's semantic, that's a sort of like quick and dirty example, but like that sort of semantic inclarity, unclarity? That sort of loss of clarity is what happens in the unpunctuated line, or what you risk with the unpunctuated line. The medial caesuras are a way of sort of slowing that down, right? It's a kind of organic punctuation that allows the language to kind of reverberate through the open space on the page, through the blank space on the page. You know, it's not the hard stop of a comma, period, or colon or semicolon, right? It allows for the language to echo on both sides. It's sort of like moving a line break into the middle of the line, you know? That's kind of how I thought about it. Yeah. Yeah, thanks guys. I appreciate it.